Hello, my name is Anthony STALTARI. I'm 22 years old and I've been cutting hair now for 7 years alongside my team at Barber Boys and Barbery Australia. It was quite a funny story how it all started. I was about 14 years old and we were on school holidays with my friend and we're walking down the road and we walked past this hairdressing salon. He looked at me and he said, I need a haircut. And we were quite young at the time, so we had to call his mum up first and check if it was all right for me to cut his hair. Long story short, I did his hair and then started doing all my mates at school and I just started getting busy from that point on. So when I did my first haircut, it was actually right here in this garage, and that's why I wanted the footage done in here today. I grabbed him in the shed. I had an old pair of clippers. I made it work somehow. My first haircut was horrible, but you know, like anything, you got to learn. And I had more and more people coming in the shed. You know, started with just a chair, then I managed to buy a table to put all my clippers on. I managed to save up and buy enough clippers to be able to do a full haircut, scissors as well. And then from there I started making a little bit of money and I was able to renovate a little back room in my shed by the age of 16 years old. You know, that was unbelievable because I remember, you know, my best mate, Rod, and I had a busy Friday night cutting in my shed at 15 years old. And you know, I did like 10 or so people. I was only charging $5 or $10 at the time. And I remember counting my money and I made $100 and I just sort of looked at Rod and he looked at me. And at 15, that was a lot of money, especially for us. You know, we didn't really have that much. And he looked at me and he goes, far out, man, like you've made it, you know? And I'll still never forget that because at the time, it was such a big deal, and now it's just crazy to think about that. So Donnie actually found out about me through social media. I started an Instagram page at 15 years old called Ton's Cuts, which was what I used to call myself when I cut out of my shed. Don seen that, he ended up phoning the school that I went to, and somehow managed to get my number. And he wanted to meet up with me, and from there he said, look, I want you to start an apprenticeship. So yeah, it was quite intimidating for me being 15 years old, and then Donnie telling me to meet him at a car park just around the corner from my house. So I was just there, this little shy kid at 15 years old, sort of staring up into Don, and he's like, yeah, I want you to work for me. So it was quite an interesting story. And I really wanted to be a hairdresser and a barber. Like, that's all I really did was go home and cut hair. So it was quite full on when, you know, my dad being a really good mechanic with this massive workshop, he always thought I was going to end up running that. You know, racing motorbikes my whole life, and then telling him I wanted to be a hairdresser was really crazy. But lucky enough, I had really good parents. My mum as well, she always believed in me. And she said, look, if you want to work, she goes, you can leave school, but you have to treat this job seriously, no mucking around. And then by 16 years old, I left school. So the early days of Barber Boys was quite cool. I got to work in one of the really busy shopping centre at Tea Tree Plaza, and that really grew my skills because you were dealing with all types of clients. You were trying every hairstyle, you were learning. I had my friends coming in as well, and it was just a crazy atmosphere. So I came from a really competitive background. I raced motocross from 5 years old to 15. It was always such a big part of my life. Unfortunately, I injured my shoulder. And you know, 3 shoulder reconstructions later, I had to sort of give it up. But for me, I always had that competitive flair, and I noticed that with hairdressing there was competitions. So as soon as I was a second-year apprentice and I felt like my skills were up to scratch, I trained with Lou Fermano, who would train me nearly every night after work. We'd practice these same hairstyles, and I entered my first competition. As a junior, I entered in the senior category. And you know, it was a shock to all of us when we ended up winning that first competition at 17 years old. From there, I didn't want to stop, and I just kept looking for competitions. I found competitions interstate, such as Sydney, such as Queensland, and then I ended up qualifying for the Australian Barber title and ended up winning that at 17 years old as well. And from there, I went to New York. I had some lovely sponsors at the time. They sent me over to New York. And that was a real eye-opener, you know, because I always idolised the American barbers and how they did things. And I went to New York and I got to battle up against them. Unfortunately, I just slipped out of the top 3, ended up in 4th place. But it was an amazing time and an amazing experience at 17 years old to be able to be in New York City competing against some of the best barbers in the world. From all the competition work, I said I'd slow down for a bit and I really wanted to focus on education. Andis actually sponsored me and they helped take me overseas to do all these competitions, and they were making an education team. And they said, look, we want you to try out, seems we sponsor you, we want you to give it a go. So quite young, up on stage, I had no idea what education was about. And they're just like, so you're gonna just demonstrate a haircut and talk about how you use the clippers and so forth. So I was, really shy at the time and sort of nervous, shaking up on stage, but once I was cutting, I was fine. My talking was fluent. Obviously, there was so many things I had to work on, and I'm thankful to this day. There's always still stuff that I've got to work on, but I've got to sort of educate around the world. I started off with my first education was at Melbourne Hair Expo at 17 years old, and from there it just grew, and now I've been able to travel and educate in places such as China, which was one of my favourites, New Zealand, and I've even been able to educate over in Las Vegas, so it was quite amazing. Crazy, like in that 7 years that I've really been cutting hair, to be able to go from just a shed environment with one pair of clippers and a pair of scissors to be able to teach all over the world, and I still feel like I'm that kid that just cuts hair out of his shed, but fortunately it's grown so much more than that, and I've been able to travel around the world, and it's just a shock to me, but my mum was always really strict on me. And I was fortunate enough to have an amazing boss, Don DeSanctis. As I said, he grabbed me from 16 years old and he always believed in me. I remember my boss said one thing. When I was 16 years old, he took me to my first ever hair expo. And we gave me a Barber Boys jumper and we were walking around in these cool Barber Boys jumpers. And I remember sitting at the awards night, at the gala night, and I said, I want to be up there, I want to be up on stage, I want to win the award. And I remember he looked at me and he gave me the best piece of advice, and one thing that I'll never forget, he said, Anth, he said, if they can do it, you can do it. Since that day, that's always been my motto. If, it is not wrong, if they can do it, we can do it too. So that's been what I live for, and he's always motivated me, Don, always pushed me in the right direction. And I'm hoping that one day we can grow really big together, and I'm just really proud to be a part of such a big brand, and I'm going to continue to watch it grow. I know Don doesn't like slacking off at all. He has a lot of sleepless nights running this massive organisation, and I know he's going to keep growing and growing and growing more in the future.